Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. The Trump administration has proposed a controversial 28-point peace plan for Ukraine, outlining a framework that could see Kyiv cede Crimea and the Donbass, limit its military and forego NATO membership, while Russia would be reintegrated into global economic structures. With European leaders engaged in Geneva with Ukrainian and US delegations to craft a response to the plan, concerns are growing over its impact on European cohesion and security. Eoin McNamara, Research Fellow, Finnish Institute of International Affairs, joins us to unpack what this plan could mean for Europe, Ukraine and regional security. Eoin, welcome to TVP World. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
Good evening.
Good evening. So, Secretary Rubio has just made a short statement to the press. I'd like to kick off by sharing that with you and the audience, and then I'll get your take on it.
Well, I'm not going to get into the details on the issues. This is a very delicate moment, and it's important. Like I said, there's not agreement on those yet. Some of it is semantics or language. Others require higher level decisions and consultation. Others, I think, just need more time to work through. As an aside, I will mention that there were items that we were discussing as part of the original 28, or it evolved. This is a living, breathing document. Every day with input, it changes. There were some that involved equities or the role of the EU or of NATO or so forth. And those we kind of segregated out because we just met with the national security advisors for various European countries. And those are things we'll have to discuss with them because it involves them. So we sort of really focused on the ones that were bilateral in nature for the most part. So there are a couple, none of it insurmountable. I can tell you that the items that remain open are not insurmountable. We just need more time than what we have today. I honestly believe we'll get there.
Your thoughts on what Secretary Rubio has just said?
Well, I think his comments that a lot of it is semantic and dismissing matters in this regard. I think that's rather naive or very difficult to believe. I mean, if you know, he mentioned it is a working document, it is a draft, but we're radically divergent from an agreement that would be satisfactory to Ukraine first and foremost, and indeed satisfactory for the pan-European security order, a return to peace, predictability and confidence building in Europe. I don't think very much of that is possible going on the draft that we've currently seen, the 28-point peace plan, because of course the draft as it currently stands is simply a trade-off for a short-term pause in Russia's aggression in exchange for a long-term tension to continue to linger over Europe. And that's not good for European democracy, security, or prosperity. So we will need a radical shift to bring all stakeholders on side.
Understood. But before we get into that in more detail, I'd just like to go back to his statement. What do you read into the fact that he wasn't accompanied by Andrei Yermak, with whom he was negotiating?
I'm in the dark over that. The Russians might want to keep their powder dry. There might be more political games over that. Or Rubio, I think, also has been portrayed in media reports as weak or marginal in this process. This might have been an attempt putting him out there on his own. This might have been an attempt to show that he has a lot of ownership on this as well, which of course makes the European or makes the US administration look more united, and politically for Rubio himself, he looks more important in the process and thus much marginal. So it's a bit of face saving for him as well. I think we can look at these different indications from the outside, even though it's difficult to judge.
Now, there have been some United States politicians who said that Rubio has said to them that this was basically a Russian-authored plan and Washington just passed it on. How much credence do you place on those statements?
Well, it certainly looks like that from the outside. I mean, when we look at, there was a report in the Moscow Times, in the last few days saying the Russian banking system is creaking. They keep finding these trillions of rubles of gaps. So Russia is close to exhaustion point here. And what it cannot get militarily on the battlefield, or what its economy can't support in the battlefield, it now looks like it's going with clever diplomacy to try and hoodwink the US at an opportune moment. And the US seem to have taken that and thrown out this wish list, which of course, with limitations on the Ukrainian military, with pressure on the government in Kiev, and with essentially giving Russia de jure control of Donbass, and even areas of Donbass that it doesn't currently hold militarily on the battlefield right now, and Crimea. There's a lot in this 28-point plan that would hand Russia its strategic objectives that it unveiled to the world when it escalated its aggression in 2022, not necessarily by military means, but negotiated means. So this Russian wish list theory does indeed look quite valid at present.
Now, President Trump has set a deadline for Ukraine to agree to this agreement of Thursday. How realistic is it that some kind of thrashed-out compromise will be reached by then?
I think there will be some form of fudge, and there will be negotiations to negotiate further. I think simply trying to gain an agreement from Ukraine by Thursday is simply putting the gun to the Ukrainians' head, the Zelensky's head, and none of this is satisfactory to Ukraine. And I think there will be a lot of transatlantic diplomacy. The European leaders that Trump has listened to and consulted in the past will be involved. So I think there will be negotiations to negotiate further. If this has done anything, it's really kept peace in Ukraine on the agenda. But there are many risks there. And as I keep mentioning, a lot is unsatisfactory, both for Ukraine and for wider European security.
Now, we see a great deal of energy being put into this peace plan, both by the American and Ukrainian and European sides. Very little from Russia. Is this simply a ploy by Russia to delay things while they continue fighting?
That can never be ruled out. And even the 28-point plan itself, as I've mentioned, it very well looks like an attempt to pause Russian aggression in exchange for a long-term tension that would linger over Ukraine, over Europe, in the sense that Ukraine would only have these vague US security assurances, wouldn't be able to take its own defense fully into its own hands. There would be restrictions on its military strength. It wouldn't be able to develop a total defense system or a fully optimal, comprehensive security system. So Russia, whatever way this has been trashed out in private among the US and Russia, Russia has really been allowed to set the agenda here, and the Europeans and the Americans are now chasing to peel these back, or to peel things back, so that we do get a fair and just peace in Ukraine, which is first and foremost vital for Ukrainian democracy and Ukrainian development, but as I keep mentioning, vital for the pan-European security order. If we get this wrong in Europe and in the United States, it will linger over us for 20, 30 years to come. We will have serious tensions in Europe, and that will undermine everything else, the platform for security that maintains our development, our prosperity, and our democracy. So getting this right is vital at this current time.
Indeed. Now, you mention Europe. Now, Trump has said that, if Ukraine doesn't accept, he's threatened to reduce military sales to Europe, which are then passed on to Ukraine, and also the provision of intelligence. If he gets to that stage, will Europe be able to, to fill the gap? Will they be able to step in?
In the short term, Europe will be very, very threadbare in that regard. And negotiations with the United States to ensure Donald Trump does not take that course will be vital in this regard. We've reached this new deal with the United States under Trump that Europe pays for a lot of the advanced weaponry going into Ukraine that's kept Ukraine alive on the battlefield. And indeed, if we look at Patriot and things like that, kept Ukrainian civilians safe from some of these very vicious air attacks that Russia has been launching. Same with Ukrainian infrastructure. In the long term, I think this is another breakdown of trust initiated by the United States and the Trump administration in transatlantic relations. And in Europe, we're going to have to look at our own strategic autonomy. We're going to have to look at building up our defense industrial base, that we have autarky, independence over these advanced technologies ourselves, that we don't have to be relying on purchasing them from the United States, some very sophisticated military tech, and indeed enlarging the breadth and the depth of our intelligence networks in Europe. All of these things go hand in hand with advancing European strategic autonomy. And these days, these events, I hope, are propelling Europe down that path, because the trust in transatlantic relations has definitely been fractured by the last number of months in transatlantic diplomacy.
Indeed.
And Europe cannot fully rely on the United States anymore.
It has. You speak of Europe as though it was a single entity, but it's not really. It's quite fragmented, especially, with countries like Hungary and Slovakia who are, hesitant to support Ukraine, but also parties in France, for example, and Germany, like the AfD and the FN, could come into power, which would fragment it even further. So having a unified European Union strategic approach is almost impossible under those circumstances, isn't it?
Well, that's always the challenge for Europe. The old cliche, united we stand, divided we fall. And that's what Vladimir Putin relies on. He relies on, with his hybrid strategies of making these divides you mentioned domestically in individual EU member states, and between EU member states. He relies as the weaker actor in all this, vis-a-vis the European Union's raw military power, diplomatic power, economic power. Vladimir Putin tries to get in amongst those gaps and make them wider, and create a situation where it's not divided we stand, but it is it's not united we stand, that it is indeed divided we fall. So that really is the million-dollar question in Europe. Can we have the statesmanship that can heal some of these ruptures and build that cohesion at the political level that then filters down to consolidate things at the military level? Because looking to the United States for a solution for our defense problems is looking more and more untenable by the day.
Indeed. Now, very briefly, if you would, Eoin, do you anticipate then that if Europe is to be more self-reliant, do you anticipate the need for a consolidation of centralised power in order that it can move forward?
We certainly will need to streamline European institutions. There's no doubt about that. But I think first and foremost, NATO has existed very successfully until recently and might muddle through into the future based on consensus. Consensus has always been key. It always keeps member states' interests there. And a lot can still be done by this old method of consensus. But we do need more agreement, more consultation, and more consideration of our partners to get through less
it seems
political
to be that
grandstanding and division.
It certainly seems to be that way if Europe is going to make any decisions in any speedy way. Eoin McNamara, thank you very much indeed for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good evening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, though. News coming right up.